All right, I'm back. So I got this riveted. All I needed to do was off camera. I needed to use a clamp, a spring clamp, to hold the ends down so that I can rivet without the thin metal kind of lifting up off of the hinge itself. That worked on one side, but not so much on the other, and I don't know why. So I'm gonna show you this bracket, and this is actually a great example. Pretty much all on a single piece. This is a really good example of things that can go wrong with riveting. Now, like I said, considering what this is and what it does and what its function is on the airplane, I'm not going to redo any of it. But here's what I want to show you. So first of all, hopefully this will stay in focus. Here are the shop heads, right? And they look decent. They are the correct size and the correct depth, but this one here, this was the -4 rivet. This is smeared a little bit. The other ones are nice and round and they look decent. This one is smeared. But like I said, I am not going to drill that out to redo it. Don't know how well that's going to show up on camera. I don't want to get too close because I know the focus starts to get weird. And I don't know if you'll be able to tell, but you can see on the thin aluminum around the rivets how it's kind of dimpled. And that's a sign of over squeezing. Like I said, there is that kind of shady area. If I went with a longer rivet, I could have under squeezed it a little bit, but then I wasn't so sure that it would hold up with the vibration and everything. There might get some movement between the two pieces. I didn't want that. So I elected to go shorter rivet, squeeze it a little bit more with this super thin material. That's what you get. You get a lot of that pillowing between the rivets. Not the end of the world, not aesthetically pleasing, but it's not going to hurt anything. And then last but not least, if you look at the gap between the hinge itself and the thin metal, that side doesn't look too bad. But then when I flip it over onto this side's got a pretty good sized gap between the two pieces of metal that were riveted together. And that's just because this rivet is slightly over squeezed and it just kind of flares the thin aluminum. Even though I had pinched this down with a clamp, that's the end result. So not exactly the best work. Could be worse. If you look here on the inside, this is probably going to be really difficult to see because of the lighting. You can see the flush heads are really nice. Maybe. Flush heads are nice and flat. However, where is it? This one, the second one from this end, the second rivet from this end. I don't know if that will show up on camera. That hole was actually countersunk too deep. So there's a little bit of a ring around the rivet head. And I don't know if that's going to show up again. I don't like to get too close to this camera because I can't tell if it's focusing or not. So I'm using a little Osmo Pocket. The screen on the camera itself that I look at is only like maybe an inch wide. And it's only like maybe 3/4 of an inch tall. So it's a very tiny screen. I can't hardly see what I'm doing most of the time. So I apologize for that. But anyway, countersunk too deep, a ring around the head, some flaring of the thin material, some pillowing of the thin material, and a poorly dimpled shop head, a little too long, and it kind of smeared a little bit. All on one piece. Isn't that awesome? So, now that I have this where it needs to be at the moment, I can go ahead and try to figure out, let me see if this is going to be on camera. Sorry. So now I can position this on the cowling itself and try to figure out where it needs to be, both in this orientation and this orientation. So forward, aft, left, right, where that needs to be positioned. so I can cut the other hinge half. Am I in camera? I can't tell. So I can cut the other hinge half and figure out where that needs to be positioned so I can get the cowling drilled. Then I can put this piece together in here and figure out where to position the door so it will close. All right. So let me get some stuff situated and we'll see what I can do with that. Howdy everyone. All right, I'm going to try this again with the camera on the tripod. I'm going to try to yell so you can hear me. And as I said, I've got a microphone on the way. Well, I don't have it on the way, but I'm looking in the microphones, so hopefully this poor audio is temporary. Okay, so I've got the hinge made. Well, not made, but I'm in the process of making the hinge. All I have done now at this point is just really quick cut a length of matching hinge to match the hinge half that I've riveted here. So now that I've got the mating piece, I've cut a length of hinge pin and I can put these together like that. And now I'm going to try to figure out how to fit this to the cowling. So obviously the cowling is upside down. This is the center of the cowling, if you will, and this is the end of the cowling. So the door needs to open up toward the center. So this is going to be where the hinge goes. So I put the hinge in place, kind of falls into place nicely. A couple of things, and I'll bring the camera down here in a minute. I've got these big radius corners on here, and the hinge can ride up and down those corners. So of course I want the hinge to be nice and straight with the door. If the hinge is cocked, then the door is going to open weird. Okay? So in order to get this hinge to lay correctly, what I had done, I had basically just laid it on here and I put a mark roughly where the edge of the hinge resides. And then I took a measurement from this straight edge over to that mark, took that measurement and added another mark down here, and then drew a line. So this line is parallel to this edge. Now, when I put the hinge down, I can reference that line and I can run this hinge up and down these corners until it lies parallel to my reference mark. And I'll show you that here in a minute when I get the camera down. The other thing is, again, since these are large radiuses, the hinge tends to rest a little bit on that radius. So if I pull the hinge forward, now the hinge doesn't touch the radius at all. So I'm going to do a combination of two things. I'm going to run this back and forth until it's parallel with the line, and then holding it down, I'm going to move it in this orientation so that this part of the hinge will lay flat against here. So this hinge half is going to get riveted. This hinge half I also want to lay down flat against the cowling. I don't want this like that. I don't want this riding up. I want this to be down enough so that it lays flat as well. So I'm going to do a combination of both of those. I'll line up my line nice and straight, and then I can see if this needs to be moved up a little bit to get it to lay flat. And actually it really doesn't. Once I get this parallel to my reference line, this lays pretty good. So at this point it's just a matter of I'll pre-mark and pre-drill the hinge for the holes, and then I'll get this situated on the cowling the way that I like it, and then I'll transfer those holes into the cowling, drill the cowling, and then do the countersinking and the riveting. So let me me reset the camera here. Hold on. All right. So here we are. So here's my reference line that I was just talking about. And you can see I can run this hinge up these corners. And you can see it in relation to the line, how it swings, right? So I want the hinge to be parallel with this opening. So that's why I did the reference line, and I can run this back and forth until it is nice and even with that line. And then I can check here where this hinge half meets the fiberglass cowling to make sure that it's laying flat. I don't want this hinge half Of course, that's an exaggeration, but I don't want that. I want that hinge shaft to lay down nice and flat, and I want the hinge to be in line with my reference mark. So once I get that laid out, like I said, I'll pre-mark, pre-drill the hinge. Then I'll transfer those holes into the cowling, drill the cowling. Then I can come back and do some riveting. Now, since this is fiberglass, and since as per the instructions for all the other piano hinge, there's an option to reinforce these, if you will, with fuel tank sealant or epoxy, something like that. I'm going to use fuel tank sealant. So I'm going to do the same thing for this. I'm going to put down, after I get it ready to rivet, I'm going to put down fuel tank sealant. I'm going to rivet this in place. Since I'm going to be mixing up fuel tank sealant and doing riveting for that, I might as well mix it up and rivet all of these hinges. And that's going to be a big batch of fuel tank sealant, and that's going to be a lot of riveting. So I don't know if I'm ready to do that yet. I want to make sure that these hinges all work. And that leads me into another video. I've got my bottom cowling in place. And what you need to verify is that you can get this top cowling on and off as if you were going to in the real world, right? So up until now, I could just pull these clecos out of the hinges and get the cowling off. But now I need to make sure that with all of the hinges in place and with this door opening cut out, I need to verify that I can take this cowling, put it on, get it to fit, get all the hinge pins in, including reaching through this opening to get these hinge pins in place. And then make sure that I can do a disassembly and get it off, right? That's why you need to do the angle cuts on these knuckles. Just on the curved pieces, you need to cut these knuckles at an angle so they'll fit in and out at an angle in relation to the hinges on the fuselage. Now, I've already done that. It was not on purpose. It's just that I had the cowling on and I was doing some final touches on gaps and things like that. And I just gave it a shot and it worked very, very nice. More than impressed. Because I thought for sure I was going to have to come back in here after the fact and start jacking around with these knuckles, maybe sanding something else. I don't know. But I'm going to put this up on a tripod eventually, not right now. And I'm going to film real time the process of dropping this cowling in, putting in the pins, and taking it off. That's to come. Right now I'm going to focus a little bit more on this door. And then I'll shoot the video fitting the cowling. And then when I'm confident that that's good, I'm confident that my gaps, my sanded gaps all the way around are good, I'm going to go ahead and fuel tank seal and rivet all of these hinges, including this one. All right? All right. Talk to you guys later.